Hi, welcome to Feck TV and the News at 7. I'm Alan Noonan and this is Chris Bennett. We're leading off tonight with breaking news of a death in Longford after a wall collapsed inside a garden and DIY store. The Connacht Gold DIY garden store on the Athlone Road in Longford. One of the internal walls collapsed there, leaving 5 people injured. One man is confirmed as deceased, another is critical, and 3 are seriously injured and have been brought to Tullamore General Hospital. The accident occurred at about 2:15 p.m. today, and the wall involved is a 40-foot high wall, an interior wall in the building. So, any thoughts on that, Chris?
Shocking stuff. I suspect more of this story will be unfolding as the day goes on.
Exactly.
It's terrible stuff. The wake of Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue took place today, with family and friends and colleagues sending their condolences to his wife and 2 young children. The state funeral for the murdered officer will take place tomorrow in Dundalk and will be attended by Michael D. Higgins, Enda Kenny and Alan Shatter. Books of condolences are open across the country for people to write their words in for Adrian Donoghue.
The next story that we're focusing on tonight is the protest in Cork City Hall last night by the Campaign Against Household and Water Tax. They marched into one of the meetings of the Cork City Hall councils and shouted, "No way, we won't pay, blue shirts out." Over a dozen Gardaí were called to remove the protesters, and there were banners also flown inside in the City Hall meeting of councillors which stated, "Axe the tax or watch your vote collapse." This is following on from a protest last October as well, which took place, but the council did not resume last night, which it did in last October. Any thoughts about this, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the interesting thing that came out about these protests, Alan, is I believe it was carried in the Evening Echo today that the Cork City Council are now trying to very quickly pass through measures which will actually ban people from these meetings in future. So sort of what the protests have done is essentially shot themselves in the foot a little bit here, because they may have essentially pushed the council into closing down all public interaction over these meetings, which would be a bad thing for everyone.
Yeah, and it seems like the response from both sides was pretty off that. Firstly, the council are going to be anti-democratic and close off their sessions to further people entering and viewing what is going on, but also perhaps the protesters could have had their protest outside and garnered interest from people there, do you think? No?
Yeah, I actually think that would have been a better way of going about it. I mean, the message still would have been carried. The protest wouldn't have incurred sort of this, let's say, different action by the council themselves. And frankly, I think it would have been better for everyone involved had it been a protest, within the boundaries of the outside.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be talking to some representative from the Campaign Against Household and Water Tax on Your Call show soon.
It's certainly one that's going to keep on going, though. I don't think these protests are going to stop. I think we will probably, see an escalation in them in the coming weeks.
I think you're absolutely right. I think.
We've got a third story tonight from Syria. 65 bodies have been found on the banks of a river running through the city of Aleppo today. This was discovered by the Syrian Human Rights Observation, which is a UK-based organisation. They haven't confirmed yet whether this will be the total death toll of the bodies, as many more may potentially be within the river itself. Most of the bodies are young men who have had their hands tied behind their backs and appear to have been shot in the head in an execution style. Both sides of the Syrian conflict have blamed each other for the action. The problem being that Aleppo is at the moment essentially split into two as a city between both sides, with 700,000 civilians already having fled. It's incredibly difficult to sort of apportion blame for these things, but one thing that can be said, Alan, is that the atrocities do seem to be escalating on a daily basis.
It seems like the government has lost most control over both its military forces and the region of Syria more generally as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the type and the brutality that we're seeing of reprisals is, as I say, escalating quite rapidly. What we're also seeing as well is far more sectarian violence between the sort of the Sunni and the Shiite factions of this conflict. The rebel side generally being the Sunni majority, and the government forces tending to be the Shiites. It's a very worrying, worsening crisis, and yet again, we're seeing more of the brunt being taken on civilians in these cases, yet with still no real action from any outside power.
Is this likely to have any sort of impact on the international relations or international approach to the Syrian problem, do you think, Chris?
You know, Alan, I would love to say that it would. I would dearly love to say that, but unfortunately, from the past experience of what we've seen, what we ourselves have reported on the Feck TV site, in terms of the massacres, the atrocities, it still doesn't seem to be having enough of an impact, or there are organisations out there who are really pushing hard for this. But unfortunately, the deadlock still exists around countries like China, around countries like Russia, who there is still a stumbling block in place. Whether or not we may see a renewed effort on Syria once the crisis in Mali sort of quietens down a little bit remains to be seen, but it's certainly, as a humanitarian crisis, it's worsening.
Yeah, it seems like massacres are becoming an almost weekly occurrence in Syria now at this point. We're moving back to Ireland for our next story, which is on bullying, and the government action plan on bullying was published today by the Minister for Education, Ruairi Quinn, and he stated that schools now need to have a formal record, a logbook as such, of bullying incidences within the school. They also need to pass further rules and guidelines by November on bullying, and furthermore, the Board of Management is also going to be more involved in any incidences that relate to bullying. Also, $500,000 has been ring-fenced for funding for the National Suicide Prevention Office to investigate how better to treat bullying and cyberbullying.
I suppose good news all round for that, though I would suspect, really, is $500,000 enough money to be putting into something which is clearly been proved over the last weeks and months to be a very, very serious problem in Ireland, and I suppose amongst Ireland's youth in terms of depression, in terms of suicidal tendencies. It's a huge, huge problem out there in Ireland, and I would probably say that $500,000 is not enough money to be put in. Yeah, absolutely, Chris. It seems like the government is stating that, okay, we'll ring fence $500,000. It's a problem that's important enough to warrant this. And yet it seems like they're almost playing departments against one another, saying, okay, well, we're not going to guarantee nurses' wages, Gardaí wages, we're going to protect this, we're not going to protect that. It seems like they're playing favouritism with people's lives when you're talking about health. Absolutely. I mean, I suppose when you compare it to the 40-odd million that goes on the road safety campaigns, and yet there are more deaths by suicide in Ireland per year than there are on the roads, there seems a misbalance between 40 million and 500,000. It's a huge discrepancy there. Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. Although having said that, the efforts to enforce tighter rules in schools is a very good thing. Do you think that it has almost been an unspoken problem in Irish society, this idea of talking about suicide and suicide risk? I certainly do. I think it's perhaps a misunderstood problem. I don't think it's very difficult to find an understanding around this. There are some great charities out there who do some good work. Bounce Back being one of them, who work with youths who have been affected or are affected by suicide. But a lot more needs to be done. Hopefully, this will be, let's say, the start of it. Today, interestingly, a coin hoard of 81 gold coins dating back over 400 years were found by construction workers in a public house in Tipperary. The coins were guineas and half guineas from the reigns of Charles II, James II and William and Mary. The National Museum of Ireland has said it's one of the most significant finds of 17th century gold coins ever found in Ireland. However, unfortunately, the champagne corks aren't about to be popped just yet, as the coins now become legal property of the state. So no celebrations for the pub in Tipperary there, unfortunately. Yeah, depressing little fact that the state now claims whatever they discovered. I'm sure they were overjoyed when they first spotted it. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of legal legal quandary on that one there, because I suppose the differences between Ireland and the UK are wide, whereas in the UK you would have a treasure finder's fee. Here, the National Museum does say that it gives rewards out to these things, but it's under no legal obligation to do so, and the rewards say this coin hoard was 3-4 million euros. You know, the reward would be an absolute fraction of that. It does seem that, you know, if you dig something up on your property in Ireland and it's worthless, the government aren't bothered, but if it's worth a bit of money, they'll come in and take it from you straight away. Yeah,
and in fact, in that way, they're almost encouraging people not to report important historical finds, aren't they?
That is actually one of the major things, because the law is built around in that way. It does encourage people to either take their coins or their trinkets, for instance, their artifacts, onto the black market because they know that they themselves will then get some profit out of it. Or potentially, unfortunately, a loss to society is that they may choose to melt the things down and sell the gold or silver on that way. So I actually think a better system would be to pay, let's say, a fair price, a market price for these things, to encourage them to not only stay in Ireland, but also to be put out so that the Irish people can see them.
Yeah, absolutely. But
yeah, it's an interesting one. We'll see how that goes. I believe our lawyer on the legal show may have an opinion on that as well. Our final story of the night is a rather saucy one and a rather interesting one coming out of Brazil. A woman over in Brazil is suing her husband and facing charges of attempted murder after she put a poisonous substance on her genitals and then begged her husband to have oral sex with her. Yes, her husband obliged, but before he went through with the deed, he smelt a powerful smell and forced his wife to go to hospital, where doctors discovered a large quantity of poison, more than enough to kill the husband, was found. It was at this point that his wife confessed to the plan, to the ploy, and it was found that she was doing this because she had filed for divorce with her husband.
Well, yeah. I was aware of the story and I forgot to read the small print that they were expected to divorce. So I guess the story here is be very careful when you are about to begin divorce proceedings with your significant other.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm not 100% sure what the chap smelled. Something obviously out of the ordinary, but his nose seemed to save him on this account.
Yeah, there was something fishy for sure, yeah.
Oh, Alan. So, brilliant stuff. Look, we have some great shows coming up tonight on fecktv.com. We've got the tech show coming up at 8 o'clock, and we also have another fantastic Your Call tonight live at 10. Please do tune into both of those. This has been the news live at 7 on fecktv.com. Thanks for watching.